And the White House is blocking access to the unredacted report by special counsel Robert Mueller. President Trump is asserting executive privilege over the report, and some congressional Democrats are calling this a constitutional crisis. But does this standoff really fall into that category? Phil Matier and I put that question to former San Francisco Mayor and State Assembly Speaker Willie Brown.
It's difficult, however, for the people on the streets to understand, what do you mean by constitutional crisis? I still have to go to work. Muni doesn't arrive on time. There are too many cars on the streets. I can't seem to, and the bicycle people says there are not enough lanes. What is a constitutional crisis as it relates to me or you?
Well, it usually, or at least the way I think of a constitutional crisis, is that there is something happening that the Constitution doesn't know how to deal with, or there are conflicting provisions in the Constitution. We don't really know how to resolve that. None of that seems to be happening here. It's not just stuff we don't like. You don't get to just call that a constitutional crisis.
No, you can't. You can
sure.
have a, no.
There is stuff we don't like. Nancy and Adam, they're very upset that they can't get their hands on the documents done by Mueller without all of the redact. I mean, and that's the constitutional crisis for them.
But for the rest of the country, it's just crisis on crisis, like a debt ceiling crisis. You couldn't figure that one out either, right?
Well, you now know that Trump created that problem by the amount of money he didn't pay over at least 1984 to 1996.
Which brings us to the next question about President Trump's taxes. Should they be going after them going back?
Well, no, let's see. No, I don't think so. I got to worry about it.
I was going to say, what would happen if somebody had asked for yours?
You're doing calculations right there. A year, maybe two.
Yeah.
I mean, is it ever going to stop?
No, probably not until we get him out. We Democrats, we got to figure out some way to win, Phil. And we use everything we can get our hands on, including his tax returns.
Okay, is there a point on this where it starts to just, the public just goes, I'm tired of this TV show, I've had it, I'm tuning out?
Well, to some degree, right, keep repeatedly calling things a crisis where they don't really actually seem to be a crisis, kind of exhausts people. And so now you say, I know it's another crisis, and, you go, forget it. You guys are just saying stuff.
The tax issue, though, is always one that can actually get you ultimately put in jail. I mean, there's one people you can't mess around with, and that's the IRS. Unless, of course, you're Trump and you own it.
So I think I saw a study that said that very few people, I think maybe under 5%, maybe even less than that, have actually read the full report. Do you feel like the Democrats have kind of lost some steam, lost some momentum because it wasn't sort of definitive and unambiguous when it came out?
Well, I think certainly they were hoping for something more. There was a lot of, there was countdowns, it's Mueller time, and people would sell T-shirts and hats. And so I think they were hoping for a silver bullet. And I think they still hope that by bringing Mueller in or seeing the unredacted report, that is going to be the case. Although I saw a report the other day that said even though certain Democrats, high-level Democrats within the Judiciary Committee, for example, are allowed to see in a very, secure way the full report, they haven't actually taken advantage of that opportunity yet. And so you go, how much of this is just them appealing to people in their base who are saying do something, and them actually, having concerns about what is underlying that report. It doesn't seem, at least according to this one report I saw, like they're even taking advantage of that just yet. Now, during his 2+ years in office, President Trump has been the focus of numerous investigations. So is this just the price to pay for being president? Phil Matier and I asked former San Francisco Mayor and State Assembly Speaker Willie Brown, is there a limit?
I don't think so, Phil. I think that in the world of politics, when you decide to run for public office, you expose yourself accordingly. Whether the rules say you should release your tax returns or not, all of that is obviously part of what you're examined on, what your intentions appear to be, and whether or not you're a true suspect. Because if you demonstrate more wealth than you have income, that's a problem.
Well, there are a number of people, I think, who would say, oh, we're so sick of hearing about all this stuff. But as soon as somebody goes on TV and says, coming up next, we have the president's tax returns from, from a recent period of time, everyone's stopping to turn on the channel. So I think some people might say, enough of this, but they're still really interested, especially from somebody who, whose whole thing is that he's wealthy and has been able to build an empire.
And you know what made no sense at all? People cannot understand how he could be the biggest loser in the whole country on every aspect of income versus expenditure.
But if I looked at half of the quote-unquote wealthy people, the whole game is to appear to lose as much money as possible for tax purposes and have as much money as possible for your own in the bank.
But that's only if you have access to ready replacement cash.
Yeah.
You really can't claim
So
losses
do you think
unless
Trump is
somebody
more
lends you
worried that
money.
he's going to look like he doesn't have money or that he has too much?
I guarantee you, with his ego, he cannot afford to let you know he's broke.
Yeah, that's the question. I was wondering, what do you think it is about his taxes that he doesn't really want them out there? Is it because perhaps his wealth has been overestimated, or is there something else in there that might be either corrupt or criminal?
Well, so look, people say, maybe he's borrowed money from Russian oligarchs, but I'm not sure that's unlawful necessarily. It may be embarrassing, but that may not even be something you could even act on, even if it were true. But there's the other issue of potentially exposing charitable contributions that he may have overestimated as well. So there are several reasons aside from just personal wealth that he could be fighting so hard to keep his tax returns private. And they probably will come out at some point, but if you have to litigate the whole thing through the court, maybe he's already well into his second term by the time those become available. I think the goal right now is just to make sure they stay private through the election. And then, if he's still in office, maybe they'll be released after.